Welcome to Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and this is the 2022 Volkswagen Golf R. This is an all-new vehicle for the 2022 model year, and it has a sibling, the Volkswagen GTI. So between the Volkswagen GTI and the Volkswagen Golf R, both of these are on a new platform called the Mk8. This is the 8th generation of the Golf GTI, Golf R sort of variants of vehicle. They've not made 8 Golf Rs, but they've made 8 different forms of Golf. So the Mk8 is new for 2022, the Golf R is in its 5th iteration for 2022, and Volkswagen sent us this pure white example to check out for a few days. So let's talk about what is new for 2022 with the Golf R, and then we'll get it on some fun roads out of the Northern Virginia DC metro area and see how it is to drive. So starting up front, let's talk about the important bits that make the Golf R versus a lesser Golf or GTI. The first being the engine. Volkswagen has the newest version of its EA888, that's EA888, 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder going on up here, and it makes 315 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. That is pretty healthy for a 2-liter turbo 4. You can get a little more torque if you get the DSG, which is the 2-pedal gearbox that is offered on this car. Volkswagen does offer your choice of 2 transmissions for the 2022 Golf R. Keeping with tradition, you can have either a standard 6-speed row-your-own manual transmission with 3 pedals on the floor, or you can have their excellent DSG, which is a dual-clutch automated manual. Put it in drive and forget about it, or use the paddles to change gear. If you get DSG, which is at this point very proven, everyone loves it, myself included, you get another 15 pound-feet for a total of 295 pound-feet of torque. I guess the manual, some components of the manual can't handle quite as much torque going on there. Either way, from what I understand, it's just a tune difference, but is the same EA888 going on. It is an evolution of the motor that's been in the existing Golf R and GTI for the last generation or so. Now going all the way back to the Volkswagen Golf R32, back in, 2002 or so, every Golf R has all-wheel drive. So Volkswagen calls it 4Motion, and you have standard all-wheel drive on every Golf R. That is a difference with the Golf R versus the GTI. The GTI will only be front-wheel drive, granted less power, less torque, but regardless, if you want or need to drive all 4 wheels, you will be buying a Golf R. Now speaking of that all-wheel drive, moving to the rear of the 2022 Golf R, the Mk8s have a little bit of a trick up their sleeve with the all-wheel drive. Volkswagen has given the rear differential the ability to torque vector, which means it can send up to 100% of the power that it receives to one of the 2 back wheels. Does not mean you can get all 315 horsepower to one back wheel. The all-wheel drive will only send so much of that to the rear axle, but whatever it's got back here can send to one of the 2 wheels exclusively. That's great for the sake of corner exit when you're just looking to drive hard. Volkswagen also gives you in your drive modes a drift mode that kind of turns all this up to 11 as best as it can, and so they say will let you drift your all-wheel drive turbocharged hatchback. Of course, with drive modes comes adjustability, and you get a lot of it with the Golf R. Not only do you have that trick all-wheel drive system that can kind of vary how it sends power around based on your drive mode, you also, of course, have the expected things that adjust, like your steering weight and effort and feel, your throttle feel, your exhaust can have variable levels of loudness, both with the exhaust itself and the sound that comes into the car from Volkswagen's sound actor. The other thing they give you is an adjustable suspension. They call it DCCC, and it is much like every other adaptive suspension on the market. It's got dampers or shock absorbers that can be stiffer or softer based on the drive mode that you pick. The interesting thing is that you've got your 3 drive modes, but then you've also got an individual setting, and Volkswagen gives you a ton of adjustability in there. So just like if you had a race car with really high performance racing shocks where you've got 20 to 30 clicks of adjustment, they give you something similar here with your infotainment system. I'm not saying everyone's going to use it to the best of their abilities, but that's why there's also the pre-configured drive modes. But nice to have at least that option. And then the other thing that isn't really adjustable part of drive modes, but Volkswagen does upgrade, is the brakes. You have a 14-inch front rotor and a 12-inch rear rotor on the Golf R. Those are upsized over the GTI because you've got, of course, more power and have to slow this all down at some point. And then the final piece of all of this is the price, of course. How much does it cost for one of these 2022 Golf Rs? Well, the nice thing about these is you really don't have a whole lot to choose from. You have your choice of 3 paint colors. You've got white and something like a black or a gray, and then you've got a wonderful bright blue, which is really the only way they should come in my opinion. But you've got your 3 paint colors and your transmission choice, and that's it. I said, you know, manual or DSG. The price of this car right here is $44,090, 44,090, and if you want that DSG, you add $800 to your MSRP. That's it. So pretty simple as far as what the Golf R is, what they've done to it. Now let's get out on the road and talk about how it is to actually drive. All right, so let's talk about driving the 2022 Volkswagen Golf R. So we're on the way to some really good driving roads. If you've been following on our social and following the Hot Girl Summer Road Rally that we are hosting, we're doing a dry run today of that drive. So we are getting off of these kind of 4-lane highways and into some good mountain roads, and we'll talk about how the Golf R feels on this dry run of this fun route. As far as when you're driving on the highway, we can talk about that to start. Really good cruiser for what it is. That has been a hallmark of the Golf R, the GTI, the Golf platform for a really long time, is that, you know, they are cars that can be used day to day and you know, serve as your only vehicle, especially given these are all hatchbacks. The Mk8 continues that, which is really wonderful to see. As far as things that are highway specific, you know, Volkswagen does give you all these driver assistance features that are kind of expected and standard at this point across the board. You've got adaptive cruise control, you've got lane keep assist. It's not really lane centering, so you do have to obviously keep your hands on the wheel with all these systems, but it more helps if you're drifting out of the lane versus keeping you centered. One confusing thing, and this is something I have an issue with across the board with all the controls in this car, everything is more or less a touch control, which I'll talk about that in just a second, but there are duplicative controls that do different things or allow you to do different things based on if the car is moving or not. So in this case, in the center stack here, there's a series of 4 buttons, one of which is for your driver assist, and you can push that. It will come up on the center screen, and then you can try to control things and say, oh, I want to turn off adaptive cruise control, I want to turn off lane keep assist, and it just says this view is not available while driving. Okay, so we close that out. If you push in the end of the turn signal stalk, it brings up the same assist systems options in your gauge cluster. You can turn them all off right here from the touch buttons on the steering wheel. So a little strange. That is duplicated, and you can do it here but not here. The other menu that is duplicated, and you can do it on the move with either control, is again this center stack of 4 buttons. One of them is for your drive modes. Well, you've also got a button that says R on the steering wheel. They do the same thing, they take you to the same menu on the center screen. So a little fascinating, questionable decision as to why they did that, because the problem, obviously this is something you get used to, but as a driver, I want predictability, both with how the car behaves and how all the interface treats me. And it's not 100% predictable, so I don't love that. As far as the rest of the controls in here, we've got a few minutes while we're on the straight road. Volkswagen has gone to an all-touch setup, which I first experienced in the ID4, which is their electric crossover vehicle. And this is by and large pulled straight out of that car, which means you have touch controls right below your infotainment screen for your climate control and your volume. You've got touch controls below that for driver assistance, a climate control quick menu deal, parking assist, and drive modes. You've got headlight controls over here that are touch panel. You've got defrost that's over here, which is a little unique location for it, but front and rear defrost over here, also touch panel. And then you've got touch panels on the sides of the steering wheel that control your cruise control, your volume, your track, your gauge cluster screen, all touch. These are haptic, which means you can push them in. If you have a Mac laptop in particular, it's a very similar concept to their Force Touch trackpad, where anywhere you push on it, you feel the click in that location. But they're not buttons. And then you've got touch controls up here on the roof for your sunroof and your interior lighting and those sorts of things. Really, really don't love that. The only actual buttons you have in here are for your parking brake down here, your mirror controls, and your windows. And thankfully, compared to the ID4, they gave you 4 window switches, not 2. The ID4 is a mystery there. There's 4 window controls here. But all this stuff should be buttons, first of all, because this is all easy enough to use while you're stopped. When you are moving and the road influences, you can't precisely touch things. You want to be able to control things without taking your eyes off the road. Yes, you can get used to some of this the longer you drive the car, but a lot of this, it just feels like innovation for innovation's sake, and I really don't like it. It would make the car a little bit of a tough sell for me. The one thing that really has been irritating is the strip under the infotainment screen with your climate controls. You've got dual zone climate, and then you've got volume in the middle, and they were all just like little touch pad things. The problem is the screen is set in and just a hair down from that, which means you want to rest your hand or your finger on those touch strips to precisely touch the screen wherever you're trying to go and to navigate to. And what that means is you will almost guaranteed turn up the heat or turn down the heat if you're trying to go back to the home screen of CarPlay or change tracks or pause your music in CarPlay. So if they just move the screen up a little or move the controls down a touch, that would be better. Also, these controls are a mystery. They are not backlit at night. Everything else is. So again, feels like innovation for innovation's sake. I know I've spent several minutes whining about these controls, but I just don't understand. I really don't love it. Now that said, car is well behaved on the highway. The ride is very good. When you put it in comfort, the adaptive dampers in this car, in your individual drive mode, you can adjust them like 30 different settings, which is a danger because you can really set them to something that makes them feel really terrible and then blame the car, when in reality you just had a lot of choice and made a kind of goofy choice. But you have comfort, sport, and race as your 3 basic pre-programmed drive modes, and they all control the suspension, among other things. The suspension in this car in comfort mode is excellent. Driving through Washington, D.C., the roads are lousy in parts of D.C., pavement patches and things. You can just go right over it all, and it really doesn't bother it. It feels very well set up, good compression and rebound. Just everything is nice as far as how it controls the body and what it passes through to you. Obviously, steering gets stiffer and lighter based on the drive modes as well. I think it's kind of light regardless, unless you're in race mode. Then it finally stiffens up. It's got decent feel across all of the drive mode settings, but even in sport, it's not the stiffest thing, but race tightens it up to where I like that. The exhaust also changes between all the drive modes. Thankfully, it is free of theater until you get to race mode, which is to say there's not a lot of pops and burbles and bangs, which I appreciate, because you don't necessarily want that all the time. And even in race mode, which is what I'm driving in now, you can hit it and lift off the throttle, and it's not really too overly dramatic, which is good. A lot of other brands will add it in for some flair to flex on people as you're driving through downtown, and I really find it irritating more than anything. So I'm glad Volkswagen did not do that here. But in general, in comfort mode, this car is a peach to drive and just cruise through town and run errands. That's always been a hallmark of these cars. The shifter, I think, is generally pretty good. The throws are a touch long, but not in a bad way. It's pretty typical of a Golf R in the past. And that is paired to a clutch pedal that is not too heavy, not too light. The engagement is fairly close to the floor. I've driven other cars recently where the engagement is higher up. This is closer to the floor. And the thing I've learned is you have to give it a little more throttle than you think to make sure it bites and you're not, lugging the engine away from a stoplight. Again, this is not really a challenge except when you first get the car or if you're test driving the car. obviously every manual takes some time for you to really get comfortable driving and feel natural to you. But it's a nice transmission setup. You really have to consider if you would pick the 6-speed manual or the DSG. Volkswagen's DSG has historically been tremendously excellent. I have a lot of seat time in many Mark 7s and Mark 7.5s between GTIs and Golf Rs. It's hard to go wrong with either transmission. I think the manual in the new car, in the Mark 8, is better than the outgoing manual. I thought those were a little disconnected feeling, a little rubbery, not the best experience. I think in this case, I'd be happy with either transmission, whereas if you asked me in the Mark 7.5, I probably would have picked the DSG because it's technically quicker, and I didn't think the manual was great enough to make me really want to drive it day to day. And then the seats in this car are, of course, pretty heavily bolstered here. This is your only seat option. These have these kind of blue centers and then the heavy bolsters, both for your thighs and your back. They are heated and ventilated. I think they're fairly comfortable. It took me a bit to get the perfect driving position, but I have found it. They have memory. They have adjustable lumbar, both up and down and in and out. So really appreciate that. Ironically, when you're cruising around town, I have kind of felt that the steering wheel is a little big in diameter, but that's just kind of a goofy one-off thought. It's a nice thickness. It's all very appropriate for this car's mission, which is to be fun, but also something you can put on a suit and take it out to an important meeting or out to a nice date night or something, and it feels pretty appropriate doing that as well. So I think it has that duality really well done. All right, so we're in the twisty bit of the road, so let's just let's talk about how this thing drives. So this has that torque vectoring rear differential that can really send power left to right, and it feels pretty good. This is a fun hatchback more than anything. If you get the GTI, it's a front-wheel drive car. This is a good all-wheel drive system. It feels really natural. This is easy to be driving quickly. It likes to rotate. Steering is, again, good feel, and there's good bite from the front end here. I'm not working this too hard, which I appreciate. Braking is good. Obviously, you shouldn't have to do too much on a public road, but it feels pretty nice. And then if you need to downshift, your pedals are well spaced for heel toe. This feels so good. The interesting thing, this is, more than capable, more than confidence inspiring. You can hear my camera gear in the back. I'm sorry about that. Everything feels really good here. This just does not feel as flingable and as carefree as the Mark 7.5. This is a little more buttoned up. It does feel a little heavier. Like I said, it's got that extra curb weight to deal with, but it is still, easy to throw it in, and just it goes exactly where you want it to go. So if you like to drive, at this point I don't care about all the touch buttons because I'm not dealing with them. I'm dealing with the analog bits of the car, and this is a delight. And so that's the fun road thoughts. As we go down the other side of this mountain, easy, predictable, agile. It does not feel quite as playful as the old car did, which, from a spiritual point of view, makes me a little sad. Is it a good car to drive when you have your chance to put your foot in it? Yes. All of the complaints over, everything with the controls in here disappear because the chassis, I think, is good. Is it a little heavy? Is it a little, a little more buttoned up than the old car? Sure. I had a big thing for the Mark 7.5. They were just so excellent. This, I think, is still quite excellent. It could be a touch better if they dealt with how you interact with the car when you're not just using the steering wheel. real. All right, and that is it for this review of the 2022 Volkswagen Golf R with 6-speed manual. Thank you so much for coming along. As always, please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe right here on YouTube. You can give us a follow elsewhere on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. If you'd like to join a community of other LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, please head over to outmotorsports.com. We have a whole community over there, and we would love to get to know you. Until next time, please stay safe, be well, see you for the next one.